Hey everyone, welcome back. Pull up a chair, crack a fresh pack if you've got one, and welcome to episode 2 of Track and Vector. It's the Star Wars Unlimited podcast where we look at the game through a practical analog lens. I'm your host, Taco Pete. Now before we look at that table today, I've got to take a quick detour into the theater. I know the internet's currently having a field day talking about the Mandalorian and Grogu bombing out in the box office. The pundits are writing their obituaries, but honestly, I don't care about the corporate ledger. I love the film. Specifically, my inner child completely lost his mind over the Anzellans in that movie. The old school practical puppet effects on those little guys instantly brought me right back to the grit of the Dark Crystal and The Empire Strikes Back. Man, that was so good. That tactile, living Star Wars, that's what I grew up with. And quite frankly, come on FFG, I would love to see that little 4-man crew get their own card in a future set. Give me an Anzellan Droidsmith unit card, we got a ship, and I'll sleeve it up on day one. And speaking of that intersection between incredible visual design and the physical hobby, I'm introducing a brand new segment to the show starting today. Let's get into Card Art of the Week. Alright, let's dive into some card art. If you were lucky enough to hit the Galactic Convention last year, you know how cool it was to actually meet some of the FFG design teams in person. Getting to talk to the artists who bring this cardboard to life was a massive highlight for me. So for the inaugural art pick, we're going to look at a brand new spoiler from Ashes of the Empire, Hera Syndulla, Renegade General. The illustration on this card by Robin Franz absolutely stunning. It's got this heavy, texturized, painterly aesthetic, and it immediately makes me think of some classic Frank Frazetta fantasy oil paintings. Like it's got the drama, it's got incredible depth, and it treats the character with some real gravitas. And of course, Hera Syndulla, she carries that crucial Spectre trait. And if you listen to the pilot episode, you already know I've got a massive soft spot for the Spectre crew. It's a perfect bridge into the giant elephant in the room today. Because while we love the art, Lawless Time represents the game's first major rotation. The original block is now moving into the Eternal format. A lot of players are in an absolute panic, right? The pundits online are shouting that mid-range is dead, that the tools are gone, and you've either got to play hyper aggro or grueling control miners. But on this show, right here, we don't panic sell our binders, and we don't buy into the manufactured hype cycle either. If you look at the design history of TCGs, rotation is actually a renaissance, right? It forces the game away from the raw, inflated stat lines and locks it into a tactical thinking person's chess match. So here's our flight plan for episode 2. In our next block, we're doing a historical dive into the mid-range lineage, tracing how the archetypes survived the transition from old school sets straight into a Lawless Time, and then the incoming Ashes of Empire. Then, in the Efficiency Engine, we're tackling the financial side of a new set drop. I'm going to give you a highly efficient box opening framework designed specifically for busy adults to optimize a limited collection on launch week without blowing your mortgage on booster boxes. And finally, let's open up the Analog Archive and take a look at a premium piece of tactical gear that'll keep your cards safe during your local pre-release events. No panic, no fluff, just a steady hand on the controls and a smart blueprint for the new meta. Let's drop the tracking, lock our coordinates, and take a look at the opening draw. Alright, moving into our first major block today, let's talk about the historical evolution of the mid-range archetype. If you listen to the hyper-competitive Spike channels right now, they're going to tell you that the format rotation has completely killed the mid-range strategy. They see the original staples rotating out of Premier and they panic, assuming the archetype's dead just because the card pool shifted. But to understand why they're wrong, you have to look at the lineage of how mid-range actually functions in Star Wars Unlimited. Go back to the early days of the game, the original blocks like Spark of Rebellion and Shadows of the Galaxy. In that era, the mid-range was a game of raw stat efficiency and overwhelming power on curve. You played massive high stat units, looking for simple value trades, and you brute forced your way to control the board by turn 5 or 6. It was effective, but it was structurally rigid, and it relied entirely on having the biggest numbers on the table. But look at how the game evolved when we transitioned into a lawless time, and now we've got the Income and Ashes of Empire set. The designers didn't kill mid-range, they actually made it smarter. They shifted the archetype away from raw stat pumping and moved it toward tactical fluidity, psychological leverage, high synergy mechanics. I mean, let's take a card like Watto, no money, no parts, no deal, from the Legends of the Force set. Now, if you know me, you know I didn't characteristically enjoy Watto on the screen in the prequels. He's a tough character to like. But man, I'm going to tell you what, that card was a complete blast to play out in Vegas last year. For 3 resources, Vigilance, he drops as a 1/6. Now, those are massive defensive stats that block early aggro all day. But his on-attack ability is where the modern mid-range mind games live. This is where a card like Watto gets fun. He forces your opponent to make a choice. Either you draw a card or you give an experience token to a friendly unit. Now, you are handing your opponent a structural dilemma, right? You are forcing them to guess your game plan while you gain raw strategic value either way. Now, let's actually paint a picture of how this works at a real table on a Tuesday night. Like, let's say you're sitting across from a hyper-aggressive Sabine or Tarkin deck. They've gone first, they've dropped a couple of cheap, fast ground units, and they're staring at your base like it's an open target, just ready for the taking. It's turn 3. Instead of dropping an aggressive attacker that'll just get traded into, you're going to slide Watto into the ground arena. Now your opponent stops. Hey, look at that 6 health. They realize they can't easily swing through him with a single low-cost card. And if they ignore him and rush your base, on your next turn, you swing Watto into one of their small units. Sure, he takes a scratch, but he stays alive. And his text triggers, right? Now your opponent's got a headache. If they let you draw a card, you're refueling your hand with mid-game answers. If they choose to let you pass out an experience token, suddenly your other utility unit scales up and completely locks down the arena. Now you are winning the mental game by stripping away the optimal lines of play. And if your opponent tries to answer that value by swinging heavily into your board and leaving your units damaged, well, that's when you punish them with Legends of the Force version of Plo Koon. I don't believe in chance. And honestly, I mean, come on, who doesn't love Plo Koon? He's the ultimate cool-headed Jedi. I mean, when he enters the arena as a 6-cost, 6-power, 8-health monster, not exactly a true mid-range, I get it. But man, if you've got the Force with you, Plo Koon gains grit, meaning he gets +1 power for every single point of damage sitting on him. And Plo doesn't care about being hit. He thrives on the pressure. Let's take a look at the math on this setup. All right, say they spend an entire round trying to break through your defensive front. They hit your Plo Koon for 4 damage, leaving him scarred, but very much alive at 4 remaining health. Because of grit, that 6-power card instantly spikes to a massive 10 power. On your turn, you swing back, delete their biggest threat, or you drop a massive chunk of damage right onto their base. That is the definitive heartbeat of modern mid-range. You absorb their initial push, you let your units take some bruises, and then you swing back with an absolute powerhouse addition that swings the entire momentum of the match. This is a beautiful mirror to the lore of the Star Wars universe itself. I mean, mid-range, it's not the Galactic Empire with an endless budget of raw starship power. And it's also, I mean, it's not a desperate, hyper-fast rebel cell trying to score a lucky, aggressive thermal detonator hit before collapsing. Mid-range is the hidden network. It's characters who don't have galactic superpowers, winning through sheer grit, tactical flexibility, and keeping their crew alive through unexpected synergy. When you sit across from an opponent in this new Premier format, your goal isn't to race them down the track. Your goal is to absorb their initial aggressive push using smart defensive utility tools like Watto. or something in the like manner. Let that dust settle, and then drop a hammer like Plo Koon to choke out their tempo. For the busy adult player, this historical shift is actually a massive victory. When mid-range was just a game of raw power stats, you were forced to continuously chase and buy the exact high-priced meta cards of the week just to keep your stat lines competitive. But in a synergy-driven modern mid-range meta, victory goes to the player who understands their deck's engine. It rewards clever positioning, patience, and knowing exactly when to pivot from defense to a crushing counteroffensive. You don't need to spend 40 hours a week on a digital simulator to master this era of the game. You just need to understand the flow of value. You need to look at your board not as an army of isolated numbers, but as a living, breathing crew that works together to outlast the storm. And speaking of managing a changing board state without giving yourself a massive headache or burning through your mental stamina, you have to have an accurate ledger of the game's most critical number, your base health. Up next, we're pivoting into the Efficiency Engine to talk about how to manage a real-world wallet when Ashes of the Empire drops. And we're going deep into how to game that launch week trading market. Stay tuned. All right, let's pivot from the lore and the local table tactics straight to your ledger. Welcome to the Efficiency Engine, the segment where we look at the financial mathematics of the hobby. Today, we are mapping out your launch week blueprint for the upcoming Ashes of the Empire drop. Look, if you're busy with a mortgage, a family, and a finite amount of hobby money, launch week can be a dangerous minefield to navigate. The trading card market runs on manufactured FOMO, fear of missing out. The internet channels will tell you that you need to buy 3 or 4 booster boxes blindly on release day just to keep pace with the meta. Everyone's pushing their own agenda. But look, on this show, we track value. And blindly cracking boxes is the single lowest efficiency play you can make. Now let's take a look at the actual math of a new set release. When a set drops, the singles market spikes to an artificial, hyperinflated peak driven by tournament hype. A flashy legendary card might sell for 40 or 50 bucks on day 3, only to plummet down to 15 3 weeks later once the supply stabilizes. And the supply will stabilize. If you try to build a deck by changing hot sequels on a launch day, you're doing nothing more than burning cash. So what is the smart pilot's alternative? It's a strategy I like to call the one box matrix. On launch weekend, you buy exactly one, hear me out, one booster box from your local game shop. Support local. This isn't to find every card you need, you won't. It's simply to establish your foundation. Cracking that single box will easily give you a complete playset of almost every common and nearly every uncommon card in the set. This is going to form the physical bedrock of your collection. More importantly, this is going to give you that irreplaceable tactile joy, that dopamine hit of opening fresh packs with your hands without draining your bank account. Here is where we expand the matrix to create a fantastic, positive vibe interaction at your shop on launch weekend. This is going to be the ecosystem trade strategy. When you crack that single box on Friday night, you are inevitably going to pull a few cards that simply don't fill your personal play style. Maybe you pull a hyper-aggressive space unit or a niche, high-rarity card event that belongs in an archetype that you just have no interest in running. Look, here's what you do. You go to your local store's launch event on Saturday morning. Check the room. You're going to see competitive tournament players who are frantically trying to piece together a very specific, optimized deck list for a planetary qualifier. You know the feeling. They aren't looking to collect, they are looking for specific puzzle pieces. And they might be short 1 or 2 copies of that exact legendary you just pulled. This is where you can create a genuine win-win scenario. Right? Don't tuck that card away in the back of a binder, never to look at it again. Bring it to the table and talk to those players. Let them know what you have. because that card is at peak demand for their specific goals. Right now, it carries massive trade quality for it. You can sit down, have a great conversation, and offer to trade that single, high-profile card for a bundle of reliable, stable mid-range pieces from older sets, or maybe even utility rares from the new set the competitive crowd is currently overlooking. You're not trying to shark anyone or pull a fast one. You were doing a fair, open exchange on the free market. They get the high-velocity tournament card they need to complete right now. They don't have to wait for shipping. Meanwhile, you get a handful of beautifully designed stable cards to expand your local casual decks. Both of you walk away from the table happy. You've helped a fellow local player complete their build, and you've kept the trading economy inside your local storefront healthy. Once those launch weekend trades are cleared, you completely close your wallet for 14 days. Count them, 14 days. And during that time, you don't buy a single pack. You don't look at the online marketplace. That's probably the toughest part, right? What you're going to do instead is take those 2 weeks to audit what you actually have. Check out the mid-range shells you already own, like your Kanan Jarrus or your Hera Syndulla decks. Map out the exact surgical remaining upgrades they need. Then by week 3, the marketplace hype cools down, the online supply gluts, and those overpriced launch day single cards drop significantly in price. This is when you strike. You spend a tiny fraction of what a second booster box would have cost you to target the exact singles you need to complete your engines. You are optimizing your collection through patience and calculation. You get the fun of launch day. You support your local store with a box purchase, but you let the impulsive players subsidize the singles market for you while you wait out the storm. Look, it's efficient, it's stress-free, and it keeps your hobby running like a finely tuned machine. And speaking of keeping a clean, precise machine running right on your play mat without losing your mind during a frantic tournament match, let's take a pivot away from the card economy and look at the physical gear saving my eyes at the table right now. Let's go ahead and open up the Analog Archive. To close out our flight plan today, let's step away from the card text. Let's turn down the competitive static and open up the Analog Archive. This is the part of the show where we look at the physical craftsmanship and material reality of the tabletop hobby we call Star Wars Unlimited. With local Ashes of the Empire pre-releases right around the corner, managing your setup at a crowded local game store table can get messy quickly. I don't know about you, but jumping from one position to the other, I feel like I'm always leaving something behind. So today, I want to talk about a piece of kit that's completely changed how I track my games. I'm talking about the Life Puck by Metal Fab Tokens. I actually ordered 2 of these things last month, one for me, one for my son. These little digital gems are an absolute game changer to have in your kit. We saw tons of players using them out there at the Galactic Convention last year, and it's easy to see why they've taken off. I mean, first off, these things are incredibly user-friendly. You aren't clunkily fumbling around with plastic dials or spinning cardboard wheels that get bumped out of place when someone shakes the table. They just work. They're easy. They're stable. They're highly visible. You know, what really sold me on these things as a mature player, it's another way of saying one of the old guys at the table, are the custom screen preferences, right? You can adjust that display to a highly legible, high contrast setting that genuinely helped my eyes out when I'm playing under those harsh, bright fluorescent lights of a game store during a long 4-round tournament. On top of that battery life is amazing. Throw it in your deck bag and you can trust that thing's going to last you through weekend-long events without sweating a dead screen. That's just one of the many conveniences of the Life Puck. I mean, look, let's be honest, man. These things just look incredibly cool sitting on a playmat. It feels like an authentic piece of tactical sci-fi gear right out of a cockpit dashboard. Hello, Millennium Falcon. If you're looking to clean up your board state and keep a precise ledger of your base health, check out the team at Metal Fab Tokens. It's an investment in your tabletop comfort that's going to pay off immediately. And that, my fellow pilots, brings us to the end of episode 2. next week, we're pivoting the radar towards the Twin Suns multiplayer format. We'll be breaking down how to build a high synergy singleton deck that can survive a 4-player free-for-all without drawing the entire table's crosshairs on turn 1. And look, that is something I struggle with, but I'm trying to find a way to work through. We'll talk about my strategies next week. Until then, take care of your collection, support your local game shop, keep your eyes locked on the tracking vector. I'm Taco Pete, signing off.